Roger Stone here for Colonial Metals Group. Colonial Metals Group helps Americans protect their future with the most trusted store of wealth in human history. That's actual physical gold and silver. If you're retiring or you're retired, go to colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone right now for your free Roger Stone Colonial Metals Group Retirement Protection Kit. Or call 800-747-6589. That's 800-747-6589. Call now to receive your free home safe and up to $7,500 in free silver.
Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby.
And welcome to Katz and Cosby. John, we are hours away from the huge debate, first face-to-face with Trump and Kamala Harris.
Well, this is the big night, and, well, let's see what happens. I didn't think it was going to happen.
I know, you owe us $1.
And guess what?
I
That's
owe
right.
$2.
That's right. You owe me $1, you owe Rita $1.
We are rich.
Yeah,
this is called rich.
And this potentially could swing the pendulum tonight.
I think it's
will.
It's
going to swing
Craig
the pendulum,
Eden.
whoever wins this debate.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. If you look at the polls, and in the last few hours, there have been a whole bunch of new polls out. They are literally neck and neck. They are saying this is the closest that two candidates have been in a presidential race in modern history at this point in time, so close to the election, which is incredible.
That is incredible.
Which is very scary, given the fact that this woman has no record at all, and the only record she has is tied to the Biden administration and all the negatives that come with that.
No, it gets better, by the way, Judge. John and I were just talking about this before the show. She just put up some policies on her website. Guess what? A number of news organizations are saying they look so familiar. She literally copy-pasted some of the policies from the Biden campaign, literally word for word, and pasted them on as hers. So she owns those policies.
That's a great Biden tradition, plagiarism.
Yeah, it's you can't make it up.
Look, it's the same people that were running the Biden campaign and the Biden White House that are supporting her. So there's no surprise there.
There isn't. But what's a surprise, John, is that she's trying to paint it like new and fresh. What's new and fresh about that?
Well, she's got a new smile and she's got a new pantsuit. And,
that's right.
And
that's right. I forgot about that. That's right.
Wait, how does it go? Where's that song? There's no business like show business.
Yeah, we don't need a recording. We got John Katz singing.
But that's exactly what this is. It's just
show
show.
Business.
It's all show.
All.
It is
There's no substance.
Remember
no substance.
Remember what Dwight Eisenhower said? Political campaigns are like selling soap. So that's what they're doing. They're soaping us over with Kamala.
They're lathering us over with it.
Absolute nonsense.
And John, you and I were talking. This is interesting. CNN, of all places, put out not that long ago. She filled out an ACLU questionnaire. It was in 2019. She is on record saying, okay, Medicare for all, gun buyback, also supporting transgender surgery. For migrants and for prisoners, that taxpayer dollars should go to that. I would consider that outside of the mainstream for a lot of Americans.
But you know what? What we should tell the listeners is do your research, do your homework. Don't be fooled by the show, like John just said.
Now, my biggest concern is the Iranians cannot afford to allow President Trump to become president. And my other biggest concern is the Democrats that have done so many things wrong cannot afford to have President Trump get elected. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, Melania Trump, I'm not kind of connecting the dots, but just Melania Trump just came out and said that there's a lot more to the story of what happened at the Butler rally. It's interesting. She's got a new book out, but she's always very quiet and understated. And she says she just wants some more answers. She doesn't know what, she said she wants more answers.
As they say in Brooklyn, she's dropping a dime?
She could be, maybe a quarter in this case, I would say.
There is definitely something more to the story that we've heard. There's definitely much more behind the scenes that we haven't heard
Go
yet.
back to the beginning. First, they try to knock the guy off the ballot with ridiculous litigation. Then they try to bankrupt him. Then they try to convict him and make him a felon, and they try to put him in jail.
And when all that failed,
he's still there. He's still there.
Still there. And by the way, a lot of people wonder if the Judge Marchand, even though he pushed back the decision, this is on the sentencing in the New York case, he pushed it back, of course, to November. People are wondering, is that an insurance policy that just in case he gets elected in November, who knows what he's going to decide at the end of November? Did you hear Nancy Pelosi just came out, guys, and made her sort of basket of deplorables comment, if you will, and said that 30% of Republicans are sexist, racist, and homophobic. How is that for being a uniting party?
That worked out so well for Hillary Clinton when she called everybody a basket of deplorables. Anybody objected to her policies?
Right. If that doesn't turn people off. By the way, you know somebody who unified everybody? Joe Lieberman. I want to remind everybody there was a film today at the Library of Congress, a showing. It's called Centered. Joe Lieberman, of course, a great former vice president, somebody who unified everybody.
And today is Bill O'Reilly's birthday.
Yeah, that's right. Bill O'Reilly, the great Bill O'Reilly.
And the good news is Bill O'Reilly is still younger than me.
Wow. Two great men. That means you're both around. You're both maybe legal now, right?
Yep.
Okay, good.
We can vote.
You can vote. And by the way, we're going to talk about voter integrity later on in the show. We have Anna Polina Luna. And joining us now to talk about the debate and the high stakes, it is hours away, is former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, we're so glad to have you back. Explain what you think how important tonight is for both candidates.
Well, I think it's dramatically more important for Kamala Harris. Trump's base has stuck with him through 2 impeachments, a series of other efforts. You know, it's been amazing the amount he's had to put up with, and yet he's still there. And I think what that says to me is that he's almost certainly not going to lose very many people no matter what happens tonight. On the other hand, most of the country doesn't really know Kamala very well. And a lot of her current support is very soft and is based on people responding to the way the news media has projected her and, sort of built her up as an iconic figure. And I think as people learn how radical she is, her support begins to weaken. I think Trump's base is probably 48 or 49%. And her base is probably 42. I think that if you really look at the data we've developed at America's New Majority Project, which have been taking polling since 2018, you can see there's a hardcore left, and then there's a much bigger center that is actually very anti-left on virtually every issue that she stands for. And I think as people learn that, she has a huge problem. So she needs to come out of the box tonight and do well enough that she's seen as a genuine alternative to Trump. And if she can't do that, I think she'll decay very rapidly.
So Mr. Speaker, Hillary Clinton just came out recently and said baiting Trump to self-destruction is one of the best things that Kamala Harris can do. That's clearly their strategy. They kind of keep putting out that she's going to try to go for these zingers. How do you see that playing out, and how do you see Trump responding? I know the mics are going to be muted, despite what Harris tried to change.
Well, I would say Hillary's a good example that baiting Trump doesn't work very well. This guy's been through a whole series of debates in 15 and 16 where he knocked out 15 other Republicans. Then he debated Hillary and I think ultimately won those debates. And then he's basically come to totally dominate the Republican Party. He normally speaks for somewhere between an hour and 90 minutes. So the idea that somehow he's going to freeze up tonight verges on silly. And he also, people don't understand this, but Trump's debate preparation is 7 days a week. He's listening to people all the time. He's thinking about things all the time. The idea that somebody would hide in a room like he was cramming for a final exam tells you they're not ready to be president.
Yeah, we were talking, John, and we talked about it on the show yesterday, that 3 a.m. phone call. And the world is really on fire right now, Mr. Speaker. And you think about it, it could not be a more pivotal moment. I mean, you look at what's going on with Israel, Russia, Ukraine, China. There are times where you really do need somebody who is a really strong commander in chief. Do you think we will clearly see that contrast tonight? She's going to try to pretend like she is, and her ads she kind of portrays like she's had this epiphany. How does Trump clearly make that contrast so the American public knows it's bait and switch?
Well, I don't know what the rules are, but what he ought to do is say, when Bernie Sanders said Sunday that you were pretending to switch so you could get elected, was he right? Sanders, I thought, was just devastating Sunday when they said, why do you think she's changed? And he said, oh, she hasn't changed. She's just pragmatically pretending to be somebody to win the election. And with friends like that, you don't need a whole lot of opponents.
Absolutely. And, tonight, I think she practiced 10 standard answers to everything, and she's just going to have she's going to have 10 answers regardless of what the questions are.
You know, what's really challenging about television and what most people don't fully appreciate is in the end it's about authenticity. Trump may be rough around the edges, but he's authentically rough around the edges. Reagan came across as an authentic person. Obama, for that matter, whether he liked politics or not, Obama came across as genuinely Obama. Her problem is that she is endlessly phony, and she's endlessly been trained. And I also think part of it's biological. One of the great advantages Bill Clinton had was he never lied. He always said exactly what he had to say to get through that moment, and at the moment he said it, he always believed it. So you didn't have any, if you ever watched Clinton at his peak, he never had any hesitation. One of the challenges that Hillary had and one of the challenges that Kamala has is she's going to slow down and try to remember what her coaches told her to say. And that gives you sort of a half-second pause that looks inauthentic. It looks like, oh, yeah, she's trying to remember what she's memorized. And Trump won't have that problem because Trump doesn't memorize. He just learns.
Mr. Speaker, what do you think is going to happen? It's interesting. I've been watching the spin today from the Kamala Harris team to explain these dramatic flip-flops, like you said, with these canned lines. And they kept saying a line which makes me think she's going to say this tonight, that in her time as vice president, she's evolved. And that's why all of these ideas that are huge. I mean, we're talking about her views on ICE. We're talking about her views on guns. We're talking about her views on fracking. I mean, it's obviously inconceivable, but she's going to come and say, it is because, she's evolving over the last 3.5 years. How does he spin that and say, that's a lot of evolution?
Well, I think all you say is, so since you evolve so easily, how can we possibly know who you'll be in January?
Great line, Mr. Speaker. Great line. Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for being with us here on such an important night. We love you, Newt. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Newt.
And joining us now, we have Professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, you made a lot of headlines the other day saying you are no longer a part of the Democratic Party. You've been a Democrat a long time. Why'd you make the change?
I was a Democrat from the time I was like 13. I walked through the streets of Borough Park in Brooklyn supporting Philip Shuppler, who was running for assemblyman. I've never voted for anybody but a Democrat for president. What made the change was the Democratic National Convention, which was essentially an anti-Israel rally, both outside and inside. And then when Joe Biden said the people outside make some good points, they were calling for victory for Hamas, burning American flags. And then, all of those things together, when they featured some of the most anti-Semitic speakers at the Democratic National Convention, the Reverend Sharpton, Keith Ellison, AOC, it made my skin crawl. And I said, I can't be part of that kind of a party. I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent. But I can't be a Democrat anymore. My family is furious at me, because my family has been Democrat for as long as they've been in America. But I just, I have principles and I have standards, and I live by those principles and standards. And, maybe someday the Democrats will come back to me. But like Ronald Reagan said, I didn't leave the Democrats. Democrats left me.
How many other people do you think feel the same way you do this go round?
I have gotten hundreds of emails and texts and calls and letters. People are agreeing with me completely, and I hope others will agree with me. The only way to change the Democratic Party is to send them a message. And if more people quit and say, we just can't be part of AOC's party, we can't be part of Liz Warren's party, of Bernie Sanders' party, of Keith Ellison's party. Keith Ellison may be the next Attorney General of the United States. This is a friend and a supporter of Farrakhan. These are not the people I want to be associated with. I'm sorry. I feel homeless. I feel much more comfortable with folks like you. That's why I love being on your show.
Professor Dershowitz, I'm sure, first of all, we remember that moment at the Democratic National Convention when we saw President Joe Biden saying to the protesters, they have a point. And today
that happened. The vice presidential nominee.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Program, said essentially the same thing.
Yeah, they're protesting, quote, for all the right reasons.
No,
give me a break. That's what he said.
All the wrong reasons. I mean, he's driving me away from the Democratic Party and people like him. What will he do if he's vice president? I don't trust him. And, the speaker talked about what will Harris do in January. I'm worried what Harris will do on November 10th and on January, on right after Election Day. Somebody who flip-flops like that has no principles, and they're just holding their fingers up to the wind. I think it was Bernie Sanders who admitted the other day that, of course, Kamala Harris doesn't mean what she says when she says she's moving to the middle. She's just saying it to get elected. Don't worry, progressives. As soon as she's elected, she'll come back to what I believe in, Bernie Sanders believes in, socialism, anti-Israel, anti-America, and you name it. So I just have no trust, no faith in her.
She's also made, Alan's Richard Weinberg, she's also made very clear she wants to rethink the commitments to Israel and arming Israel and giving support to Israel. She said that already. So what do you expect from her if she becomes president of the United States?
No, I'm very worried about that. And, Donald Trump has said that Israel's future depends on him being elected. I just wish it was easier for me to vote for him. I wish he hadn't said what he said about on January 6th. I wish he hadn't attacked McCain, who's a great patriot. I wish he hadn't threatened to criminally prosecute the people who he believes persecuted him. It's not easy for me, but it's not easy for me to vote for either of them. But I'll have to make a decision, like so many others will.
It's a secret ballot, Professor.
Yeah, but not for people like me. The
secret's out.
There's a lot of people that are going to vote for Trump that won't dare admit they're going to vote for Trump.
Because it'll be socially ostracized.
My wife videotapes me voting so she could prove it to her friends.
By the way, what happened to you on Martha's Vineyard when you acted as a lawyer for Trump in impeachment?
Well, I got canceled by the library, by the Hebrew Center, but
so much for liberalism.
Yeah, but also by the 92nd Street Y in New York, by Temple Emmanuel in New York, by the Ramaz School. We live in an age of cancel culture. I can't.
Well, we now live in an age of go woke, go broke.
Yeah,
and that's.
I hope so.
And that is the new turn.
I hope so. But can you imagine, after 50 years of teaching at Harvard Law School, I cannot be invited to speak at Harvard Law School.
Wow.
Disgraceful.
They will prevent me. If I'm invited to speak at Harvard, the speech would have to be taking place a mile off campus. I was invited once by Chabad. They had to move the speech from Harvard Law School where I'd have been attacked, probably physically, to Chabad, which is almost a mile away from the law school.
Wow. Well, we admire your courage and your honesty. Professor Dershowitz, it's so great to have you here. And let's see what they say tonight. If there's questions about Israel, it'll be interesting to see. Let's see. Wow. Thank you so much, Professor Dershowitz. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you guys, after the break, joining us for the rest of the show, we have Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor, is going to be joining us. And we also have Ron Vitello, some stunning new details about migrant crime in America. That after the break.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. This is an enormous night. Of course, the big presidential debate just hours away. One of the big issues about border security and threats. And also, before we bring in our great guest, we also have with us, John, here in studio, Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor, and also with the Heritage Foundation. We are so thrilled to have you here.
Well, thanks for including me, Rita.
It's such an honor. And I think, we were all talking on the show yesterday. Who do you want to pick up the phone when it's a 3 a.m. call? And the world's on fire. Sadly, it is in so many directions. Your thoughts before we go. How big is the threat level and how important is that right now, making that decision?
No, it's critical because we have fires breaking out in 4 different locations. We've got the border, which we'll talk about with Ron. We've got Europe with Ukraine. We've got the Middle East with Israel. We've got Asia with Xi and potentially Taiwan. The only person who can handle this is Donald Trump. I'm sorry. Kamala Harris just isn't ready.
Wow, not ready for prime time.
No.
And we'll see what the focus is. Well, joining us now here is Ron Vitello, former border chief, also a former acting ICE director, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Ron, really great to have you back on the show. You just heard Victoria's take. How concerned should we be, especially right now? We're on the precipice of the 9/11 anniversary. And you can't think of, of course, how vulnerable we are, how vulnerable we were then, and how vulnerable do you think we are now?
Well, thanks for inviting me. No, we're at maximum risk. I mean, you all have just covered it. We've got a proxy war in Europe, and we've got a proxy war in the Mideast that we're supporting. The opposition in both wars, as we should. Right? Israel's our friend. We want Ukraine to succeed. And we know that Iran is playing games because this administration has funded them in ways that could not have been imagined before the Biden-Harris presidency. And at the same time, we have a border that is in complete chaos, even with the executive order, even with the eyewash that they've painted over what's going on down there. We still have thousands of people coming to the border every single night, whether they're let in by CBP and this administration in a parole scheme that I don't think is benefiting anybody except the individuals who are being let in. And then the people who are still jumping the fence every single night. And we know that this administration we have seen records on the border in the number of encounters. We've seen records in the number of people who have died trying to get here. We've seen record numbers of people who are on the terrorist watch list who have been encountered by CBP. And we've seen record numbers of people, what the government calls known gotaways, which means what? They've come across the border illegally, been seen by law enforcement and not apprehended. And there's almost 2 million of those people in the United States. And the effects are felt everywhere in the country. We see what's happened in Aurora, Colorado, just outside of Denver. And we know this vicious gang from Venezuela has infiltrated every large city in America and many small towns as well.
Ron, I want to ask you also, as the former border chief, former ICE director, the one thing I keep hearing, and you brought up Aurora, it made me think of the governor there who was like, oh, well, that crime is just an imagination. It's not. We see it on the videotape. They look like Scarface going to the apartment building, but it's that downplaying. How important is it that we finally get an accounting? I mean, we heard today this unbelievably gripping hearing on the House side today where they were talking about migrant crime and the murders and what's really happening. These are true victims of crime. But it seems like in a lot of places they are downplaying the numbers or they're not separating it to say those were migrants that committed the crime. There's a little bit of a big game, shell game, if you will.
Right. This political party, the Democrats specifically, and Kamala Harris included, they're beholden to the woke ideology of their supporters. And so they downplay what happens at the border. They blame Donald Trump in the beginning of their administration for what was going on at the border. And then these blue cities and blue mayors are happy to point the finger and ask taxpayers, in the case of New York, for what, $12 billion in the next 2 years to paper over the huge influx of migrants that they've seen every day since the beginning of this administration. And we all know, people who work for a living, people who care about their families, people who care about this country know we're never going to solve this problem if our political leadership never admits it exists. And you'll remember at the beginning of this administration, first it was Trump's fault. First it was the immigration system was broken. Then there was not a crisis. They couldn't call it a crisis to save their lives. Then they said they needed Congress's help to fix it until, about 3 or 4 months ago, they put this executive order into place, which borrows on the authority that Trump showed them how to use in the previous administration. But we're still being taken advantage of by criminal gangs, these cartels in Mexico, and would-be illegal migrants that are coming every single day.
Judge Weinberg.
Good to talk to you again, Ron. I'm very troubled by the deaths in the hundreds of thousands now of people dying from fentanyl because of what's going on. So you have the linkage between China and the cartels, and they're at our border, and the fentanyl keeps coming in. And there's no response by this administration.
Yeah, you're correct. Year over year, of more than 100,000 young Americans dying because of fentanyl. And what if you heard this vice president, what if you heard her talk about fentanyl? It doesn't exist. She's not coming live to you from the Oval Office. She's not on the campaign trail talking about how she's going to end fentanyl or she's going to hold China to account like the previous administration of Donald J. Trump did, right? This was a concern of his because he understood that the American people wanted a safe border. The Department of Homeland Security, which I spent many years in, was created in the aftermath of 9/11 because we became victims of a lack immigration policy and not enough care to a secure border and an immigration system that had integrity. The evildoers, as George Bush used to say, took advantage of that situation. And we're in a situation now where that chaos still exists at our border, and you have these people on the Democratic side, including the vice president, Kamala Harris, who are, again, beholden to the left and care more about votes than telling the truth, that care more about what they want to do in office or to be in that office and less about taking care of the border and protecting Americans.
Yeah, and by the way, Ron Vitelli, I want to remind everybody as we're on the cusp of the debate, she is on record saying she would empty out the detention centers. She's on record saying that she would defund ICE.
Defund ICE. Yeah. Imagine defunding ICE.
Come on. It's insane. Craig Eaton.
Ron, the big problem that I see is even if we were to close the border tomorrow, the tens or hundreds of thousands of people that we have let in the last 4 years, the Biden administration has destroyed this country, and there's no way we could turn around. We're never going to be able to get the gotaways and arrest all these people.
You're not going to get everybody out.
You're never going to get. You can't send them back. But
I told that to Donald Trump. And we're not going to get everybody out.
And you know what, Joe? We're never going to be able to identify who here is going to be the next terrorist. So for the next 20 or 30 years, we're going to be faced with the dilemma of all these illegals that are here and what damage they can continue to do to us.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's lasting. We can try to deport some.
No, you can't. No,
well, Trump has said that he would start with the criminals, at least the known ones. But to your point, there's so many unknown ones.
How do you find them?
Right.
How do you find them?
Yeah, absolutely. How do you do that, Ron?
Well, it is a very difficult mission for the front line of DHS, the men and women of ICE, to go and find people who have a very thin, footprint in our culture and in our society. But do cause harm and put us all at risk. And so I agree with the president and what J.D. Vance said about we need to go and find these people and send them home. Because here's the bottom line for me. If we don't do this, every time the Democrats are in charge, they're going to flood the border again. And so we have to send a message. The new administration of Trump has to send a message that they're not going to allow the Democrats to do that again, and they're going to put the rest of the world on notice that the rule of law is back in place at the border. And, yeah, we have to go after the worst of the worst that have made it into the United States, and we have to put that mandate on the DHS. That's why they exist. They exist to protect Americans. And every time a Venezuelan gang member crosses the border and gets away, anytime a criminal, somebody that's in the country illegal, illegally commits another crime, that needs to be addressed. And so we've got to end this sanctuary city nonsense, because they are only giving sanctuary to criminals. And the administration has to take a tough stance on those that are here illegally without being invited and without the permission of the government. And so that needs to be done. Yes. Is it difficult? Is it, you're talking about orders of magnitude difficult? 10 million people have come under this administration. Many of them have not been seen by law enforcement. And so they have to do it. Otherwise, we're just going to be caught in this situation every time the Democrats are in charge.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere, cleaning up shop. Ron Vitello, thank you. And thank you for your great service to this country. Thank you so much, Ron.
Great.
Thank you very
so much. And Rita, you have some hot news for us?
It's the top news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
Well, John, as we were talking here at the top of Cats and Cosby, we are now just a few hours away from our extended debate coverage. It starts in 3 hours at 8:30 p.m. And former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, they're going to square off at 9 p.m. It's their first and potentially only debate ahead of the November election. New York City Mayor Eric Adams is dealing with COVID, so he conducted a press conference virtually today. And also tomorrow marks the 23rd anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The reading of the names and the somber chiming of the bell will be conducted at Ground Zero. Also, there's going to be a remembrance event scheduled at the Flight 93 National Memorial in Pennsylvania. And those are the hot headlines of the day.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC.
Well, we are hours away from the big debate. Again, it may be the only debate between Trump and Kamala Harris. And today, the 13 families who lost loved ones at Abbey Gate, they were honored with the Congressional Gold Medal. And they heard for the first time, sorry. They were apologized to on behalf of Congress. It was a powerful moment. Brought me to tears when I saw it. And joining us now is KT McFarland, former Deputy Security Advisor under President Trump. We also have with us in studio, in addition to, of course, John and the judge and Craig Eaton, we also have another Deputy National Security Advisor under President Trump, the great Victoria Coates. We say we have the dynamic duo today. So this is so great, KT. Your thoughts about how important, first of all, talking about Afghanistan tonight, because she said she was the last one in the room, Kamala Harris, and she said she was happy with the way it was conducted. I don't think happy is a way to describe what happened. It was pathetic, and I think it hurt America in a big, big way.
Well, and because it's tomorrow, September 11th. The 2 points, the contrast between September 11th and then September 11th, 20 years later, was the Afghanistan withdrawal, and to show the incompetence of the Biden administration. But that should be just the opening salvo of their incompetence in foreign policy. Talk about, we now have war in the Middle East. Under President Trump, we had peace in the Middle East with the Abraham Accords. We now have a war in Ukraine. Under President Trump, Putin stayed in his box. We now have China, which is pushing the United States and Asia and all around the world. Well, when President Trump was president, we beat China in a trade war. So all of those things, I think Afghanistan could be the opening to just one after another, the critique of the incompetence of the Biden administration, as well as the open border.
Victoria, before I bring you in, I want to bring up, this was a bombshell that came out today, and this was on the House report. And I'm curious to get both of your reactions actually on this. It came out that, among the equipment that was left behind, the billions of dollars of U.S. military equipment, was this technology. It was biometric, devices that show fingerprints, and you're able to ID. They were able to use it to biometrically ID the allies to the United States. Can you imagine what happened to them after America pulled out and the Taliban got a handle on them? How devastating, and what does this say about this administration that they would leave something like that behind, KT?
Well, it just gives the Taliban a kill list. It was just, here are the people that cooperated with the United States. America's left them behind. Go get them. And here's how you find them, and here's how you identify them. I mean, it's just one thing after another of complete incompetence, followed by who cares? I think that's the thing that's so appalling.
Yeah, from them. You're right. That's the message, right?
Who cares? Who cares? This is old news. people died. It wasn't really our fault. We've moved on. Joyful, joyful. And so what it does, though, is, the people who are watching tonight, it's not just the United States that's watching. The world is watching this debate. And I hope President Trump is terrific. He's a great debater. I prepped him for all of his debates when he was running in 2016. He will be a stark contrast to her, because President Trump doesn't like to over-prepare for debates. He likes to be spontaneous. And so there's nothing canned about him. She, on the other hand, will have completely scripted remarks. She'll even have a scripted laugh of when she should chuckle. And the contrast between who you're really going to trust, the one who's completely scripted or the one who understands you have to meet the crisis of the moment. But all this is interesting, but I think the most important thing he can do is just hammer to the American people, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? If you are, vote for her. If you're not, if you're paying, way too much at the gas tanks, if your heating bills are too high, if you're worried about your schools, if your streets are unsafe, then vote for me.
Yeah, good point, Victoria Coates.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple, right.
And if this even comes up, KT, and good to hear your voice, I think the key thing is that President Trump insisted in all of those negotiations everyone's talking about when he was trying to talk to the Taliban to get out of Afghanistan, because of course nobody wanted to stay in Afghanistan any longer. But he insisted every last hammer should come back. Not anything should remain behind. And that drove the DOD crazy, because they, of course, wanted to leave it behind because it's cheaper to leave it behind. But he knew this was going to come up. But I also wanted to ask you, you raised the Abraham Accords, and we're going to have 3 weeks after the anniversary of the Abraham Accords, which is this Saturday, right after 9/11. We have September 14th. 3 weeks later, we're going to have October 7th. What are your fears that if Kamala Harris is elected president and puts in her team, we're going to be looking at another October 7th?
Oh, I think it'll be worse. I think that Kamala Harris is going to abandon Israel. She's made it pretty clear that she has a two-state solution, and it's not a two-state solution in the Middle East. It's a two-state solution in the Middle West. And she's going to back the Muslim voting population in Minnesota and Michigan. She wants their votes, and she's willing to sacrifice Israel for it. And, there are consequences to elections, and the consequence is that she doesn't care about Israel. She doesn't care about the American hostages that there are. She won't even talk about them. And yet she proudly says that she's the last person in the room. I'm the one that Joe really consulted when he had to make the tough choices. But if Kamala Harris becomes President Kamala Harris, I do think that the security and survival of the state of Israel is in question. She'll back away from them. She'll slow walk any weapons delivery to Israel, which Israel desperately needs American weapons, because Israel's a small country. It can't make its own weapons or all of its own weapons. And if there's a bit of daylight between the United States and Israel, Iran just will go after Israel, knowing that the United States is not going to have Israel's back. And that's the end of Israel.
Victoria.
Well, and would you even say this is a big problem for the United States? Because we have these people on our streets, on our campuses. They're here. They're dragging down American flags in front of Union Station and replacing them with Palestinian
and
flags.
Hamas flags. I mean, they're waving Hamas flags in some places, flags. Right?
How much is that a domestic national security concern, KT?
But don't you think that open border for all these years has been a ticking we don't know who's here. The Democrats think they're going to get 12 million new Democrat voters and therefore have a permanent majority, a single-party rule in the United States. But they haven't thought through the consequences of this, because they may have had 12 million illegals coming, but how many people have come in who aren't just looking for a job, aren't just looking for something to do and better their life and for their families? How many have come in who are looking to cause internal dissent and internal problems in the United States, attacks in the United States? It's a fifth column. And fifth columns, whether it was in World War I or World War II or today, are the ones you fear the most, because they destroy a country from within.
Wow, that is really powerful. KT McFarland, thank you. Really great to have you, and also Victoria, who's staying with us here in studio.
You got a woman panel. Good
I know it is. Oh, Wonder Women, plural. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
KT, thank you so much. We love you. Thank you. And now let's go to the great pollster, Mark Penn. Mark, what do you see happening tonight? The polls are definitely tightening. The New York Times Siena poll has Trump up. It's 48 to 47. It's sort of back to where the end of July numbers are. This is amazing.
Well, my Harvard-Harris poll has it 50-50. The NPR poll has it, +1 for Harris, So, yes, the polls, actually, I cannot recall a time in which so many polls actually came out with the same result. That always worries me because I've always been the outlier. So, but I think that the polls are coming, and I think Harris is going to come out swinging. I think that's what Democrats want to see, her really take on Trump and bring him down. And Trump is, Trump has got to burst the Harris bubble.
Yeah, what does he have to do to take her down?
Well, look, I thought that ACLU questionnaire today was devastating.
I agree.
When I read through the whole thing.
And by the way, tell everybody again, because by the way, you know who's releasing that? CNN. The anchor on CNN, her jaw dropped like, whoa.
Yeah, no, I listened to the CNN one, and they played it straight, in fairness to them. And look at, she comes out for the abolition, legalization of all drugs, not just marijuana. She basically comes out for eliminating ICE, and basically was passed the citizenship for everybody who's here, otherwise generally called amnesty, and even for government-paid transgender surgery for people who are detained, right, who are here illegally but detained, who then could come to get transgender surgery. It was so incredible. So how do you know what to take seriously from her? That's, it's very hard for Trump to bring that out. That would be very hard for a skilled lawyer debater to bring out, but that's what he's got to do.
I actually don't think it's that hard. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Mark. I haven't covered as many debates as you have, but I'm telling you, you've got somebody who is clearly saying something different, and stark contrast. I'm all for people, evolving and growing, but this is like a Sybil whiplash. I mean, it's like on every major issue. She wants us to believe she suddenly woke up a couple weeks ago and she's a different person. That I think he needs to clearly say, you know what? Who are you going to be? We had Newt Gingrich earlier, and he had a great line saying, who are you going to be in January? Which Kamala Harris is going to wake up today?
Well, I remember that old show, What's My Line? It used to be, will the real Kamala Harris please stand up?
Right.
But there's no, the same people running the Biden White House are going to run the Kamala White House if there is one. I mean, there's no changes.
Yeah, but she wants us to think it is.
You have a problem all over the world. We said it yesterday. Afghanistan, where are the women that are demanding the freedom for the women in Afghanistan? The women in Afghanistan became slaves all over again. And where are the conservationists? The Red Sea, that boat is still leaking. And that's 4 times the size of the Exxon Valdez.
You know what
where are the people?
You know what I'm thinking, Jen? What I would also say is, where are the voices about the 300,000 missing kids?
These are Democratic women that are supposed to be speaking out about the women in Afghanistan, and the conservationists. These are Democratic conservationists that should be speaking out about the Red Sea.
Absolutely, Mark Penn. It's true. Where are their voices? They're silent.
Partisanship rules. It's St. Harris between now and Election Day, and if she wins, she's the greatest thing ever. If she loses, it was stupid for us to try to get her elected in the first place. She didn't have any substance, hadn't done anything as vice president, and the Biden administration we should have had a primary. So you know how it is. Everything's second guess in politics, or in this case, look, she was a second-rate vice president until she got the nomination, in which all of a sudden she has been elevated to sainthood as vice president. But, look, Trump has to question, so what exactly, where are the accomplishments, right, of Kamala Harris? But I think, better than that, frankly, look, she is going to come out swinging. I think she's going to call him a liar. She is going to say he divided the country. He's going to say he's an insurrectionist. I'm predicting that she is going to be as nasty and negative as possible, and he is going to, they want him to take the bait, and he has to really paint her, if he's going to win, as being, basically one of those weather vanes that flips around with whatever seems convenient at the moment, but that you don't really know.
So they want to get him excited.
Yeah. So
I don't think he's that dumb.
No, look, he's been pretty good, but it's, I think, look, unlike Biden, she will be able to follow kind of train. She spent all these days in training. I know how it goes. I've done this, done the debate prep myself. They've had people, but I think these polls are dead even. But underneath the polls, they think he's better on the economy, immigration, crime, the major issues that they see, most of the major issues of the country, and they're unhappy with the direction of the Biden administration. And so logically, if he can hold a tie for him in this debate is a win, frankly.
Wow. Spoken from a Democratic pollster. Wow, wow, wow. Mark Penn, thank you. We love you. Thank you, Mark.
Take care.
Thank you. And coming up, we have Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna talking about voter integrity, voter ID, some huge issues that are coming up. She's got some big scoops coming up.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. We continue, of course, with John and Judge Richard Weinberg, and also in studio, our great special guest for today, former Deputy National Security Advisor, the great Victoria Coates. And joining us now, we have Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna from the great state of Florida. And Congresswoman, we're thrilled to have you here. You have been fighting the big fight. And to me, it seems like a basic thing that only U.S. citizens should be able to vote in federal elections. And yet, on the last vote of this, it's called the SAVE Act, where it's election integrity. 198 Democrats voted against it. You guys are going to try to push this again. How big of a problem is this? And what does it say that somebody would vote against that?
I mean, it's a huge problem that you have members of Congress who don't actually want to uphold election integrity. And I think you can actually hear many of them, to include representatives from New York, that are saying, we need new voters because we're losing all of our voters to red states like Florida. So, that's extremely problematic. So what Speaker Johnson is potentially considering doing, and I think what is likely going to happen, is they're going to attach the SAVE Act in the CR. Now, there are some members that are saying that they might not vote for that. And if they don't vote for that, what ends up happening is we ultimately end up basically risking an omnibus. And frankly, I think that would be the worst thing that could happen. So we'll see what happens this week, but that's kind of what we're thinking as of right now.
And that is to add it to the continuing resolution. So for funding, so attach it to funding. So then they're on the record on the Senate side, if they vote down against it. Victoria Coates, you have a question?
Just very quickly, Representative Luna, can you speak to the motivations of the Republicans who would vote against the CR if the SAVE Act were attached to it? Because that's what I think most Americans don't understand.
Republicans or Democrats?
There's some Republicans that have, I think there's Republicans that have their heart in the right place in the sense that they don't want to vote for any CR, and frankly, we should be doing the single subject appropriations bills. That's something that we've all been advocating for since we got elected, and you saw that play out during the speaker's fight in January. But then you have another faction of Republicans who potentially don't want this CR because it would allow for us to have a second bite at the apple in January under a Trump administration, where we also have the Senate and the White House. And so those Republicans, I think, are doing it for more nefarious reasons and would prefer an omnibus. And an omnibus would just be not good for anyone in the country. And so what we're trying to do is say, hey, look, we can actually get appropriations bills done. We can actually do something for the country, but, we need your vote. So I think people need to really look internally as to why they're in politics, because at the end of the day, if we risk an omnibus, everyone loses. The Trump administration is going to lose. We're going to lose. And so I think that, if they vote against it, they should be held accountable to their constituents.
Yeah, and America loses. Judge Weinberg.
Good to talk to you, Congresswoman. The problem is, let's go back to basics. Only citizens can vote in federal elections. And how do we know whether they're citizens or not unless we have voter ID? And I don't know how anybody can be against voter ID. What are they saying? Why they're against voter ID? Why is that so outrageous?
The big argument that I've heard, and I've heard a lot of this in left-wing news sourcing as well, is that, discriminatory or somehow it would prevent people from actually wanting to, like voter intimidation is how they try to chalk it up and serve it. Obviously, that's not true. In fact, I think we have a big problem here because remember, several months ago, we had a massive breach in all of our Social Security numbers being leaked. And so what this would do specifically in the SAVE Act is it would actually require two forms of basic citizenship in order to be able to be registered to vote. So it's pretty common sense. In fact, you need IDs to buy cigarettes and alcohol. Why shouldn't you have an ID to vote? And so, interestingly enough, the same people that voted against this had voter IDs, and they had their IDs checked at the DNC convention. So it just shows the hypocrisy in the matter.
How widespread, and everybody, we're talking to the great Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna from Florida. How widespread do you think some of the issues with like voter rolls are? It's astounding. And I think, you know why it's so important, Congresswoman? We had on Glenn Youngkin, not too long ago, and he was saying that he's found thousands on his, voter rolls that shouldn't have been there. Many of them non-citizens.
Texas as well.
Texas as well. And in a tight election, as we're looking at right now, that could make all the difference, right?
Yeah, no, I think so. And so what we're seeing is there in a lot of places, they actually basically did purge the voter rolls. I know I talked to the chairman in Nevada, actually, and that was something that they were happy about. But we've seen it across the country, and I think that election integrity, that's the first step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. We love having you on the show. You got to come back on again soon. Thank you for fighting the good fight.
Thank you so much. God bless.
God bless you too. Wow. Can you believe it's an issue that you have to actually say, let's make sure it's only American citizens vote, Victoria?
Well, not just point out, nobody's even looked at the rolls in my state of Pennsylvania, because our Democrat leadership won't let people do the kind of reviews that we've had in Florida and Texas. How many dead people are voting in Philadelphia?
Wow, that's a big issue. And especially because Pennsylvania is a battleground state. That's why the debate tonight is going to be there.
Yes.
Yeah. Of all states, I think you want to make sure it's only U.S. citizens voting. Judge Weinberg.
Just remember, 4 years ago, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court violated their obligation under the federal Constitution by changing the rules of the game at the last minute. So you can always count on the politicians in Pennsylvania on the Democratic side to do the wrong thing in terms of voter integrity.
Wow. And you look at what's been going on when you've got 8 to anywhere to 20 million people who have crossed our border, who don't seem to be minding committing other crimes. What's going to stop them from potentially voting?
100%.
Yeah, that's what's really scary. We have to have faith in our elections. That's the most important thing. Guys, what do we all stand for?
Truth, justice, and the American way.
And everybody, watch our debate coverage. Listen to it. It's starting at 8:30 on WABC.